What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Stardust here. Welcome to a new video here on the YouTube channel. Today, we're going through more Discord messages from developers that have been very communicative recently, especially last night / this morning. They were absolutely going ham. I have some messages here that I want to go through. Sonic disruption has been addressed and is much easier on the eyes. As we all know, when you got hit by Sonic, it was essentially like having an epileptic fit in a video game. The status requirements for our raid are based on the mechanics and story from War for Wakanda. Sonic does damage versus Vibranium, and Vibranium does damage versus Sonic. Perks from the new raid are built to enhance Sonic / Vibranium builds to help you progress through the raid better. Now, I know a lot of people were worried about this one because they didn't want to be locked in specific gear in order to do a raid, and I do understand that. But I do believe that when Brian is saying this, I do believe that he is hyping it a bit too much. We remember the enemies from War for Wakanda that benefited from being attacked with Vibranium or Sonic, and then in the end it just turned out you could get through them anyway, right? So I wouldn't panic too much about that. I do think people may be blowing that a little bit out of proportion. Yes, and this is about the Cosmetic vendor rework, by the way. Yes, the patterns returning are the old ones. We aren't adding any new ones at the time, but are leaving it open as a possibility in the future. Let me give you some context. So Brian was talking about the fact that patterns are going to be returning in the new Cosmetic rework. When people are like, are these patterns going to be anything new? You know, are they going to have new skins, or will it just be the old ones? You know, the ones that we used to get before the rework even happened. And Brian confirmed it will be the old ones. So at least they're not bringing patterns back just to bring them back, if you know what I mean. Like, it's not like, okay, we're using patterns again because we couldn't think of what to do. It's just that you can use patterns to retrieve old pieces of cosmetics that you weren't able to get previously, which is pretty good. So the cosmetic rework means new earnable skins, not just bringing back the old ones. Yep, there were brand new ones, not just outfits, but emotes, nameplates, takedowns, etc. And some I found that we made but never released. Now, let me tell you why this is a great thing, because in the cosmetic vendor back at launch, all we were able to actually pick up were outfits, right? And not the best outfits in the entire world. Oh, and emotes and nameplates as well, right? We were able to pick those two up. But the reason why this is more cool is because of takedowns. We are able to acquire takedowns in this cosmetic vendor, which is absolutely fantastic, because I honestly think that was one of the weirdest things in the world. But I do understand it does take genuine time to make these takedowns, so I do understand it. It'd be very interesting to see the sort of takedowns that are going to be in the cosmetic vendor compared to the ones that are in the marketplace. You'd imagine that the ones in the vendor won't be as great, but we'll just have to see. You know, and then this one here is, will we be able to grind for exotic cosmetics? And, you know, in this cosmetic vendor, and Brian said, I'll say this, we know that players want access to exclusive earnable cosmetics, and we're making that happen with the earnable cosmetics update. These updates seem a lot bigger than they make it come across. Obviously, the video I showed last night seemed like an entire endgame rework, right? So I would say that, you know, they are definitely lowering expectations to maybe raise them up as much as they can with this. I will say that. Then Brian says there isn't any exotic gear with Vibranium status effects yet. You would assume that will be connected to the raid, as Brian said in the first one. And also, I believe there's a photo coming up that explains this a bit more, that the normal raid will give its own gear, so you would assume that it will give Vibranium or Sonic, and Elite is where you would put that to good use if you want to. And then someone essentially said, you know, is this raid basically like a normal thing where you beat a couple of enemies, go to the boss, finish that? You know, what is it like, right? And then Brian said there are multiple puzzles with the raid, multiple bosses. It's not a traditional trash mobs, boss progression like traditional MMO raids. It's normally has taken us over little over 2 hours to complete so far. So obviously, you know, he mentioned yesterday in a video that I did about 90 minutes for the fastest team. A little over 2 hours is pretty good, you know. And I imagine as well that you've got to think, like, this brand new mission, one we haven't seen before. A lot of people are going to be a bit confused by it first. Maybe it will take 2 hours, you know, and I can genuinely see that. You know, as long as it's no timed nonsense like the OLT, then I'll be more than happy to explore that for as long as 2 hours, you know. So, someone asked about echoes. You know, how unique will they be and stuff like that? You know, how will they, you know, work, essentially, right? Will they be dangerous? And Brian said, echoes are dangerous. You know how I've been saying to farm up Vibranium status effect gear? So you would assume that Vibranium status effects are quite useful to taking down echoes. But I don't think it's going to be a priority at all, to be completely honest. And then here we go. Yep, there you go. Yep, the gear you get from normal will be vital for you to progress through the elite raid. So As someone said above, sounds to be like the raid will drop exotic vibranium gear. So as I mentioned earlier, Brian's point is that you go into the first one, you snag yourself some vibranium and sonic exotics, you go into the elite, you get the job done. Me personally, I do think it's an over-exaggeration a little bit to be worried about how much vibranium and sonic will affect people. I do understand Brian's philosophy if you want to hype it as much as you can, but I do think that in like the grand scheme of things, it's really not going to be a big deal. It'll be similar to the enemies in War for Wakanda. If I'm proven wrong, that I will dislike that just personally because I want to use whatever I want. But at the same time, I'm more than happy to keep farming and keep grinding. For me, as you guys know in other videos, I've been very critical about this game in the past. This isn't one of those scenarios where I can honestly, hand on heart, say I've got a big issue with it. But that's just me personally. I'm more than fine to hear you guys out in the comments down below. And then, RT, who's an absolute gear lord, said, about the statuses thing, right? And, said his concern. And Brian said, understandable. I was skeptical too and gave Phil and other designers similar feedback. But after playing the raid, working with the new gear progression system, it's making me thinking about new builds and interacting with the new perks in ways I wouldn't have before. We want you to be engaging with different itemization long term instead of playing the same old build. That being said, if you do want to play the same old build, you can and upgrade those items to the new level cap. So I definitely think that this is the case of like, Brian essentially saying, look, I'm just sort of saying that they would be helpful. Here's the other, you can still use your old stuff. I don't know what I'll do personally. I'd love to see the raid loot in action before I can say, will I personally go, okay, let's try a new build or let's, go with the raid gear. It's totally up to, just my own eyesight, right? I need to play the raid to understand that. And then Lejeune popped in, good old Lejeune, and said, we're going into the raid, will glass cannon build struggle or defense is going to be needed? Then Brian said, depends. If you have a strong support character, glass cannon builds will do better. That being said, there are enemies, mechanics and encounters where higher defense is going to make things much easier for you. Now, this sounds like a typical raid sort of answer, right? So there's not really a lot to go into that, but it is good that Brian gave Lejeune a response right there. Now, here's quite an interesting one. Jazzy Butters, who helped me get these screenshots, will this raid have cutscenes? Brian said, oh yes, beautiful ones. So we've always been told that the raid is going to be the end of the War for Wakanda storyline, right? So that makes total sense to have those cutscenes, and hopefully we get a cool ending with stuff like that. And then we switch over to Alex, who is the gear maestro himself, who I did a video on the other day, just kind of talking about, my experiences. No, I didn't. Actually, that's a total lie. I didn't do a video on it. No, it was essentially, we went into a Discord call. We had a nice chat about gear and stuff like that. I spoke very highly about it on Twitter, but he pops in and, Zap asks, any plans on addressing melee application of status? Alex says yes. For you guys who don't know, essentially, most of the time with ranged, it's one throw or one hit or whatever, and that status applies. With melee, it's always a combo finisher. And then here we go. I want to make more mechanical perks before applying X status to X attack, but a spin to win would be one I would want to tackle first. Now, RT was asking about Kamala's whirlwind sort of, arm spinny move, spin to win, right? And Alex was like, I want to work on more better perks before I go back to the drawing board with what I can apply statuses to. And then said, weapons as part of an exotic gear, like a summon, because someone was talking about Stormbreaker and, Mjolnir for Captain America, like the exotics, right? Where you can summon Hank Pym and stuff. And Alex said that's an interesting thought, so potentially that could be something that he goes to take and says, hey, look at this interesting thing. And then, can we please get the ability to inspect other players' gear? And then Alex said, oh my god, I hope so, not my department. I truly enjoy games that let me do that. Division was a game that I liked just running about, looking at people's builds. And it would be pretty sweet if I could, scroll over one of my friends and just laugh at their builds. Which I think that'd be proper fun. And then, any plans on giving exotic perks only found on those types of gear? Exotic perks only found on those types of gears, like exotic exclusive perks. And Alex said yes, we already have kind of a few of them, but I understand what Jupiter meant there. And then any comments on the difference in survivability between range and melee builds? Alex said armor should matter. That will make melee more viable, in addition to giving bonuses to the mentioned weird skills. Also buff a bit of melee damage here and there. So that's kind of like Alex's plan of how he sort of thinks that, to improve melee, to get it kind of up and viable compared to ranged, which I totally agree with that. I definitely think that, because in the next photo here is like, becoming immune to Stagger is another element for sure, because man, it's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, it's difficult. It is really difficult to play as a melee character in this game, unless your name is Thor, Hulk, or you're spamming Brooklyn Brawler with Captain America. So that's a really cool thing right there. And then again, people were a bit concerned about the gear going into War for Wakanda, that you may need Sonic and Vibranium to actually succeed in the Elite version. And Brian said, no one is saying you need to change your build. I'm still using Intrinsic Burst Laser Iron Man build, but using Vibranium status effects. I'm still using my normal Kamala support build, but with Sonic on range and Vibranium on melee. Now, with all due respect to Brian, saying that is kind of like in reverse, because you are still changing your build, but I do also get the point that you don't have to change the core and the heart of the build by say I do, I don't know, missiles for Iron Man. I don't need to change it that much. I just need to get Vibranium on the missiles rather than change every single gear piece. So I do get that point, right? But there you go. So that is the full messages and what we got last night. I will make sure to try and cover this as much as possible. I had a conversation with Dan, who is a developer on the PET team, and I want to upload that in 3 parts, but make sure to get this channel to 1,200 subscribers, and I will drop that as soon as possible. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in a bit.